Congress just changed one of the biggest pressure points in federal gun law, and most gun owners still do not understand what happened. If you think the NFA is gone, or state SBR bans just vanished overnight, you could make a mistake that follows you for years. Quick question before we continue, are you subscribed yet? Because this is exactly the kind of update that sounds simple on social media, but gets dangerous once real paperwork, real cops, and real charges enter the picture. Hit that button now, because in this video, I'm going to show you what changed, what did not change, and why this fight over short-barreled rifles is suddenly much bigger than it was just months ago. Here's what just happened. Congress passed a law that dropped the federal NFA tax to $0 for most of the items gun owners care about here, including short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, suppressors, and what the law calls AOWs, or any other weapons. In plain English, that means the old $200 federal tax stamp on those items was cut to zero. And that is not a small change. For decades, that tax was one of the biggest symbols of the NFA. It was the toll booth. It was the government saying, you can maybe own this, but you pay us first. But here's the crazy part. The tax dropped to zero, but the rest of the system did not magically disappear. That is the part nobody's talking about clearly enough. A lot of people heard $0 stamp and thought, great, NFA is dead. No, not yet. The registration system still exists. The approval process still exists. The forms still exist. The background check still exists. And if you take the wrong shortcut because some guy online told you it's all legal now, you could still walk straight into felony territory. Let me break this down for you. First thing, Congress changed the money part. Second, Congress did not fully remove these items from the NFA system. Third, that creates a huge legal fight because the federal government is still trying to keep the registration and approval structure in place even after the tax was cut to zero. That is why gun rights groups moved fast. They saw an opening. Their argument is simple. If the law was defended for years as a tax law, what happens when the tax is gone? And this is where it gets interesting. For a very long time, the federal government leaned on the idea that the NFA was rooted in Congress's power to tax. That was the foundation. That was the legal hook. So now a lot of people are asking the obvious question. If the tax for SBRs and similar items is now zero, what is the real constitutional basis for keeping the rest of the federal scheme alive for those same items? That question is not just theory anymore. Lawsuits were filed after the bill became law. Some groups are challenging the remaining federal registration rules for untaxed NFA items. Others are arguing that short-barreled rifles are still arms, protected by the Second Amendment, and that treating them like special forbidden objects makes less and less sense after the tax part was gutted. In other words, this is no longer just a policy fight in Congress. This is now a courtroom war. Now let's make this personal. Imagine you live in a state where SBRs are legal if you follow federal law. Before, you paid the tax, filed the forms, waited, got approved, and took possession. Now the tax piece is zero, but you still have to follow the approval process under current federal practice. So if you think no tax means no paperwork, and you build or buy first, that could still bring massive problems. Most people think the danger is in not knowing the law changed. But the truth is, the bigger danger is thinking it changed more than it actually did. If you're finding this helpful, imagine what you'll learn in my next video about the 5 words that can save you from saying something stupid during a gun stop or a police contact. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because legal knowledge is useless if you get it 1 week too late. Now let's talk about state bans, because this is where people are getting way ahead of reality. You may have seen headlines saying state SBR bans are now challenged. That part is fair. Challenged is the right word. Gone is not. Dead is not. Void overnight is not. And if you mix those words up, you could end up with a serious criminal case in a state court while thinking you were on solid ground. Here's why the state fight matters so much. When Congress cut the tax to zero, It changed the story around these firearms. A short-barreled rifle now looks less like some heavily taxed special object and more like a firearm the government kept inside a regulatory cage after removing the very tax that helped justify that cage. That gives lawyers new fuel. Not automatic victory, new fuel. And smart gun owners need to understand the difference. Most people think if federal law gets weaker, state bans automatically collapse. But the truth is, state law often survives until a court strikes it down, a legislature repeals it, or an enforcement policy changes. That means if your state still bans SBRs, you do not get to act like the ban vanished because Congress moved on the tax side. State police, local prosecutors, and state judges do not care what some viral thumbnail told you. They care what your state statute says right now. Here's a hypothetical example to explain this. Let's say you live in a state that still bans possession of short-barreled rifles. You watch a clip online saying, Congress killed the SBR tax, so SBR bans are done. You buy a short upper, build the rifle, and tell yourself you are ahead of the curve. Then you get stopped for something unrelated. The gun is found. Now you are not arguing on YouTube anymore. You are arguing with handcuffs, charges, bond money, and a lawyer who has to explain that your state ban was still on the books the whole time. That is why wording matters here. State bans are now more vulnerable to challenge. They may be easier to attack. They may be harder for the government to defend under newer Second Amendment arguments. But they are not automatically erased just because the federal tax is gone. But wait, there's something even more important. This fight is not only about state bans. It is also about federal registration itself. Because if the courts eventually say the federal government cannot keep untaxed SBRs under the same NFA structure, that changes the whole map. Not just the money, the whole map. That could affect how these items are classified, transferred, challenged, and defended in future cases. Now, quick legal note, this is educational information, not legal advice. Always consult an attorney for your specific situation. I want to slow down here and hit the biggest warning in this whole story. Do not confuse a strong legal argument with a final legal result. Those are not the same thing. A lot of gun owners hear that a lawsuit was filed and act like a court order already happened. No. A lawsuit is the start of the fight, not the end of it. And until courts issue real rulings, and until those rulings apply where you live, your safest move is to follow the law that is actually being enforced today. Now this is where it gets even more interesting. The challenge to federal NFA rules on SBRs could affect state ban fights in two different ways. First, it weakens the old story that these are some rare, extra dangerous items that must be specially taxed and tracked. Second, it supports the idea that these firearms are in common use, or at least common enough to deserve real constitutional protection. That matters because once a firearm looks more ordinary in the eyes of the law, it becomes harder for the state to defend treating it like contraband. And yes, this is the part that shocked me. The same people who were cheering zero tax the loudest are often skipping over the ugly part. You can still get wrecked by the process during this transition period. If you already own NFA items, you still need to keep records straight. If you plan to make or buy an SBR where legal, you still need to check the current federal procedure and your current state law. If you move across state lines, you need to know what follows you and what does not. If you inherit one, you need to handle that correctly too. This area punishes sloppy people. Hey, 73% of people watching right now aren't subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the gun owners who get these updates early, before the rumors turn into mistakes. Click subscribe, because the next phase of this fight is going to happen in court filings, agency responses, and state-level panic moves. Let's talk about what happens next, because this is where smart gun owners separate themselves from emotional ones. First, watch the federal lawsuits. If a court says the remaining federal registration scheme for untaxed SBRs cannot stand, that could be huge. Second, watch your state legislature and attorney general. Anti-gun states do not just roll over. If they feel control slipping, they may tighten language, change definitions, or find a new path to keep the same ban alive under a different name. Third, watch how dealers and manufacturers respond. The market always moves before the average person understands the legal details. Have you ever wondered why legal changes like this create so much confusion? Because the law does not update like a light switch. It updates like a traffic jam. Congress moves, agencies react, lawsuits get filed, courts disagree, states try new tricks, and regular people are stuck in the middle trying to figure out if a rifle is legal today, maybe legal tomorrow, or legal federally, but still banned at home. Here's what most people get wrong. They think this is only about enthusiasts who want a niche setup. It's bigger than that. This is about whether the government can keep a major restriction alive after the tax part that helped support it was cut to zero. It's about whether barrel length alone can keep driving criminal exposure when the broader legal theory underneath the system is under attack. And it is about whether states can keep pointing to the old federal model once that model starts cracking. Let me give you another real-world example. Imagine two gun owners. One lives in a free state and waits for proper approval before doing anything. The other lives in a banned state and assumes the internet already won the case for him. The first guy is annoyed but safe. The second guy may become the test case nobody wants to be. Do not be the test case. Test cases spend money. Test cases lose guns. Test cases lose time. Sometimes they lose rights. So what should you do right now? First, do not make or possess an SBR unless you know your current state law and current federal process. Second, save the hype for later. The court battle matters more than the thumbnail. Third, if your state bans SBRs, understand that the ban may now be more legally exposed, but that does not give you a free pass today. Fourth, keep your eye on how courts describe SBRs going forward. The words judges use now could shape the next generation of Second Amendment cases. And here's the part nobody should ignore. If courts start saying the remaining NFA structure for untaxed SBRs is unconstitutional, states will face a harder time defending their own bans. Not impossible. Harder. That is why this moment matters so much. Congress did not finish the job, but it may have changed the battlefield. Laws change fast. Court orders can move even faster. Subscribe now so you are not the last person finding out that your state reacted, your court ruled, or your favorite setup just moved into a completely different legal category. The next video will walk through the smartest steps to take before you buy, build, travel with, or transfer anything that might fall into this mess. So here's the key takeaway. Congress did pass a major change by cutting the federal NFA tax on SBRs and similar items to zero. But the approval and registration system still remains for now, and state SBR bans do not disappear automatically just because the tax did. What changed is the legal pressure. What changed is the strength of the challenge. And what changed is the risk of believing half the story. If this video saved you from one bad decision, one bad build, or one bad social media rumor, do me a favor and subscribe right now. Stay close to this channel because this fight is not over, and the people who stay informed are the ones who stay free and stay out of court. Final, simple disclaimer. Laws are different depending on where you live, and court cases can change fast. This video is for education only, not personal legal advice, so talk to a qualified attorney before you act on any of this.